For some people, when they go looking for God, they find him. For some people, when they want to experience God, they find that he seems to be everywhere. For some people, they report living a life that is a bit like this. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For some people, it is as if God is everywhere, always pursuing them. In the best moments, in the lowest moments, God is always there. In the light and in the darkness, he's always there. And yet for other people, they would envy that experience. They are reaching for God. Where is this God of Psalm 139? Where can I go to find him? I would go anywhere to find him. I've been looking for him and I can't find him anywhere. Why is this God so dang hidden? That is the topic that we're going to be talking about this morning. Welcome everybody here in Waterloo and those in Kitchener and West Side and Chatham and online. My name's Pete. I'm one of the pastors here. And we're in the middle of a series called Skeptics Welcome. So if you've got big doubts, if you've got big questions, if you're like, I don't buy into any of this, but I'm in for lunch afterwards, welcome to you. I hope that you find that this is a safe place to be a doubter. A safe place to be a skeptic. And today we're talking about what I think is the most difficult problem that we're going to address in this entire series. And it's not just the hiddenness of God, but more specifically, it's this category of people. Those who would say that they are non-resistant and yet non-believers, or they have this non-belief. What this means is this, is that there are, of course, some people that reportedly so, we have statistics around this, that would say, even if God existed, I don't want anything to do with him. I'm not interested in God. That would be resistant non-belief. That would be, I don't want to believe, I'm resisting it. But there's a whole other category of people, and this type of language is still relatively new, where we would say, no, they are actually non-resistant. They're actually seeking, they're open, they want to believe, and yet they find that they can't believe. Or they're open to an experience for God to reveal himself to them, and yet God remains silent. If you feel like this, then this sermon this morning is for you. But I know for a lot of us, this is new language because it was new language to me. And so you may wonder, like, what does that practically sound like? What does it look like? And so I want to introduce you to someone. I'm going to play a clip that's about 4 minutes long, and his name's Alex O'Connor. And he's becoming kind of a very well-known YouTuber who is an atheist. He is a skeptic. But he is not antagonistic towards Christianity or other religions. He is a non-resistant non-believer. He would report, I would love to believe. I'm looking for God. I just can't seem to find him. And so I want you to watch this clip so that you get a sense of what this sounds like and what it feels like to be a non-resistant non-believer.
The question then, is there such a thing as non-resistant non-belief, a non-resistant non-believer, to which all I can really say is nice to meet you. The last time I debated Jonathan a number of years ago, when I was just a few months out of being a teenager, I said that even if I found Christianity to be true, I still wouldn't want to worship the God that it promotes. I now, since then, have realized how irrational and self-defeating this assertion is, and stand before you today as an example of a non-resistant non-believer. I think it would be great if God existed. I really do. I would absolutely love to escape death. I would relish being the recipient of unconditional love. Less selfishly, I would love to be able to worship that which deserves to be worshipped. I just don't think it's true. Now, try as I might, look where I can, I find no response, no hint, nothing. I don't choose to disbelieve in God any more than I choose to disbelieve in aliens, despite how much I might want them to. So when faced with a psalm like Psalm 139, I'm overwhelmed with a sense not of beauty and consolation, but envy and disappointment. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? Where can I go, I should ask in response, to find it? Of course, you cannot know my heart. You can't know if I'm truly as non-resistant as I claim, but I hope that my actions here might betray me. As a Catholic child, I was once an altar boy. I would serve the altar of Mother Church every Sunday dressed in a white robe. In the time since then, I have, to put it mildly, been looking for God. I went to Catholic schools. I studied philosophy and theology at A-levels. I made a career out of engaging with religious arguments. I have explored arguments from contingency, from fine-tuning, from motion, from mathematics, from irreducible complexity and the alleged resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. It may surprise my followers online to learn that at university I visited numerous churches on the invitation of various friends. I spent hours talking with religious friends until the sun rose again, if you like. I attended Bible groups regularly too, which might surprise people as well. And in fact, I still do attend such groups. Just recently, I agreed to embark on a series of study of the wisdom literature, specifically reading it again in the hopes that this time I might finally feel a divine presence seeping from between the lines. I moved into a house for a year with 2 devoutly Christian housemates, with the express intention of seeing if the obvious truth of Christianity and theism that people like to talk about can be found in the minutiae of daily life. I have looked, in other words, in a great deal of places. I read Athanasius and Anselm. I read Augustine and Aquinas. I looked in Julian of Norwich and Catherine of Siena. I looked at the sociological origin of religious belief in Durkheim and Marx and Freud and Jung. I looked at religious experience in William James and Rudolf Otto. I've looked in the modern works of people like Ed Feser and Bill Craig and Michael Murray and Richard Swinburne and Alvin Plantinga. I've looked in poetry. I've looked in the Psalms. I've looked in Job. I've looked in Ecclesiastes. I've looked in Dostoevsky. I read C.S. Lewis. I listened to worship music. I prayed. I studied the gospel. I even got an actual degree in theology from a university. And nothing, not once, not nearly, not ever, not even briefly have I experienced anything that speaks to the existence of a God in the universe. I think it's asking a lot of any atheist to seriously engage with a religion that he does not believe is true in any circumstances. But I feel like I have gone above and beyond what can be reasonably expected of any atheist who wishes to entertain the God hypothesis, and for my efforts I have been awarded radio silence. The inescapable God of the NRSV, in other words, is for me the invisible God, or the inapproachable God, the deaf, distant God. The best account that I can give of this experience of complete and utter silence from deaf heaven is that all that truly exists to me is impersonal space and air and rocks. I know, it sucks.
I find him to be fascinating because of how earnestly, desperately, thoroughly he is searching for God. Be honest, if you're a follower of Jesus, most of you haven't done a quarter of what he's done. He was listing names that you were like, Aga who? What? Who's the guy? What's that? Yeah, I heard somebody say that guy's name. Like, how come he has to search so hard to find God? And so many of us in this room and in Kitchener and online and in Westside would say, I didn't really have to search that hard. God kind of just found me. I had an experience. How does that work? I hope that after listening to him, you realize what a problem non-resistant non-belief is. It's difficult to come up with a great answer. Like there's no formula that if I met a non-resistant non-believer that I go, oh, well, you just have to try this, this, and this. Boom, then you'll believe in God. And like, it doesn't work like that. And yet I find it to be a completely reasonable request. A reasonable request. What are you telling me about God? God is loving and wants a relationship with me. Okay, great. I'm open. I would like that relationship. Will he reveal himself to me? Is that not a reasonable request? Is it not a reasonable request because we have a book called the Bible filled with these experiences where God shows up in just these ways to meet people? And when you meet Christians, don't they always report of experiencing this relationship, of experiencing some kind of revelation of God, some personal revelation? It is such a reasonable request. And for someone who has gone through all that he has gone through to still say, I get no response from deaf heaven, my heart goes out to him. I am completely sympathetic to you if you find yourself in that category this morning. If you would say, man, what he was saying resonates with me. I would love to believe, but I just can't. It's just one. I heard him say in another interview, in another debate, he said, all I need is one experience, and I will become the most devout follower of Jesus that you've ever seen. One time. Something. Now, some would say, well, yeah, he probably has some resistance that he doesn't realize. Don't we all have some resistance? Don't you? Don't you still now? Didn't you before you believed? I want to take him as genuinely seeking, probably more than most of us were seeking. And yet he still says, no response from deaf heaven. So what I have to offer this morning is not going to be final answers that would solve. Like if we could get Alex here to hear the rest of this sermon, he would be solved. But I do have some ideas and some stories that if you feel like Alex this morning, I hope will help you. So to begin, first off, the hiddenness of God is not a problem only for non-resistant non-believers. The hiddenness of God is a problem for anyone who would like to follow the God who is revealed in the person of Jesus. The hiddenness of God seems to be his modus operandi. It seems to be the way that God chooses to interact with us. The biblical witness is filled with language of Isaiah says, truly you are the hidden God. The psalmist says, why do you stand so far off in times of trouble? Where the heck are you? And Job, who has everything taken from him, says, why do you hide your face from me? Jesus famously will say in his teaching, some will be ever seeing and never perceiving. For some, the secrets of the kingdom will be difficult, impossible to see. When he reveals himself in different miracles, he will often say, don't tell anybody. It's a secret. When asked direct questions, he often tells stories and responds in other questions. It seems as though God desires to be hidden. Christians throughout the century would report something known as the dark night of the soul. People who would believe in God, in the God revealed as the person of Jesus, who would profess that faith, would also go on to profess sometimes over long periods, it's like he withdraws his presence. Not that he's actually gone, but it seems like he's made it so I can't feel him, I can't see him, I can't hear him. Most famously, Mother Teresa, who served her whole life in the poorest of the poor in the slums of Calcutta, when we found her diary afterwards, revealed that for 50 long years, God seemed to be distant, seemed to be hidden. She used words like painful, darkness. Where is this God that I have given my whole life to serving? The hiddenness of God is not just a problem for non-resistant non-believers. It's a problem for anybody who chooses to become a follower of the God revealed as the person of Jesus. Which then leads us to our first big question. Why? Why then? It seems consistent that God wants to be hidden. Why is this the way? Why is this his mode? He's the creator. He could have created this situation in so many different ways, couldn't he? Why didn't he make it different? Why did he make it so difficult? To begin to wrap our head around this, let me tell you a parable from Soren Kierkegaard, a Danish philosopher writing almost 200 years ago. And he writes this parable about a king and a poor maiden. And he says, one day this king falls in love with this poor maiden. Why, we don't know, but he has a genuine love for her. And then one night he's awoken with the terrible realization, how is she ever gonna know how much I love her? And how, if we were to have a relationship, how would I ever know that she truly loves me? How will this chasm between us ever be bridged? How will the chasm between I'm a king and she's a poor maiden, how will we bridge this chasm? And so he calls together all of his advisors, all the smart people in the kingdom. Guys, here's the problem. I'm in love. How can I marry this woman and for us to have a truly loving relationship? And the advisors say, well, king, you're so powerful. Everyone does whatever you say. Just tell her she's got to marry you. We'll go get her. We'll drag her to the king or to the castle. Done deal. The king's like, guys, come on. That's not going to work. How would I ever know that she actually loves me if I force her to marry me? Come on, what else you got? So they come up with another idea. Well, how about we don't force her to marry you, but how about we like elevate her status? What if we make her rich and wealthy? What if we basically make her like a queen type status? Then you marry her. And he says, he thinks about it and he realizes, if we do that, I'll never know if she would have loved me for me rather than all the things that I gave her. If I dress her lavishly and I give her riches, how will I ever know that she loves me and not just the things that I gave her? And how will she ever know that I loved her when she was a poor maiden? How will she ever know that I don't just love her because she's like me? I loved her when I saw her as a poor maiden. So the king thinks, and he thinks, and he realizes that every alternative that he came up with came to nothing. There was only one way. And so one day the king arose, took off his crown, relinquished his scepter, laid aside his royal robes, and he took upon himself the life of a peasant. He dressed in rags, scratched out a living in the dirt, groveled for food, and dwelt in hovel. He did not just take on the outward appearance of a servant. He became a servant. It was his actual life, his actual nature, his actual burden. He became as ragged as the one that he loved so that she could be his forever. It was the only way. His raggedness became the very signature of his presence. The king chooses to become hidden in this raggedness so that he can have the relationship that he desires with this poor maiden. Now, perhaps you're already starting to put the pieces together and you recoil a little bit at this story because you realize in this parable, you are the poor maiden. But perhaps you can begin to see why it is that God would need to be hidden in his desire for a relationship with us. Because the nature of the response that he's looking for There's a certain nature to the response that he's looking for, and key to it is freedom. Because love requires freedom. And so how can the infinite, holy, all-powerful God have a relationship with finite, sinful, created humans? Whatever is going to bridge that chasm, it's going to need to have freedom included. Love requires freedom. You know what else requires freedom? Faith requires freedom. Trust requires freedom. Perhaps faith is what bridges the gap between the infinite and the finite. Why doesn't God just appear and overwhelm us with his presence? Because then we'd lose our freedom to respond, and the response that we would be giving wouldn't be one of faith. If you're taking notes, write that down. Faith bridges the gap between the infinite and the finite. To which you might say, well, but what about the people that got those experiences in the Bible? What about like the burning bush and like the guy that wrestled with God and the guy that was in the whale and then got spit out? And what about Thomas who touched Jesus' scars after the resurrection, and Paul who was knocked off a horse by a lightning bolt? What about those guys? They seem to have gotten these amazing experiences. Why can't I have those? It's something that I heard Alex say in one of his debates. He said, just one experience that would convince me that God is real, and I'll give my life to him. I started thinking about that. What's he actually asking for? One experience that would convince me that God is real. What's he asking for? He's asking for something that would circumvent the need for faith. I get your desire for an experience of God. But do not be fooled that an experience of God will somehow circumvent the need for faith. You will never get around the need for faith. Those guys in the Bible that have these amazing experiences of God, they don't get around the need for faith. And sometimes I wonder if perhaps the way that Christians talk about their relationship and experiences with God does a disservice to people who have not had those experiences. Because we talk about them as if they are completely objective, as if they are just as good as empirical evidence, undeniable, when really they are subjective. And they require faith in order to really access them. In order to really get them, you have to lean in with some faith. It reminds me of, do you remember the magic eyes? Do you remember the magic eye posters? Some of you are too young for this, but go look it up. There was these magic eye posters when I was a kid. And you would have to look at them, and they would look like nothing, they would look like QR codes, but colorful. But apparently, if you looked at them the right way and blurred your eyes, then like an image would appear. And like half of the people could see them, and half of the people couldn't. And I was one of the people that couldn't see them. And so I'd be looking, and someone else would come up behind me like, whoa, look at that, that's amazing. And I'd be like, I just can't see it. I want to see it. And it left me with this like, I'm missing out. I'm missing out on the magic eye. And then I Googled, what do you see? Like, what does it look like when you see the magic eye? And I got to tell you, people that can see them, it ain't that special. It ain't like, whoa, like it's not that. I wonder if in a similar way, sometimes we do a disservice to people that don't have the experiences by talking about our experiences as if they're so objective when really they are still subjective and require faith. Perhaps the reason why God is so hidden is because he desires this response that is freedom, that is truly loving of him, and that is filled with faith. Which brings me to my second question. So then what would I maybe say for you to do if you find yourself as a non-resistant non-believer, if that's the category that you're in? Again, I have no formula for you. Some people, I'm sure I could lead in different prayers and different exercises, and things would open up, and it would be what you're looking for. But there is no formula. And so here's a couple ideas to perhaps try on. The first idea is this: surrender your epistemology. I know I sound so smart. Epistemology is a fancy word for the theory of knowledge. It's the study of how do we come to know. Perhaps in order to know God, what you will need to do is surrender your epistemology, the way that you believe that you are to come to know things, which in our day and age is usually through empirical evidence. Give me some empirical evidence, an experience that is undeniable. Perhaps if that's what you're looking for, the first step to knowing God will be to surrender that need for the completely rational, surrender the need for the completely empirical, the undeniable. There's a great story in the Old Testament. It's one of the weirder stories to know what to do with. It's a story about a man named Abraham. And Abraham's one of the first people that God begins to interact with in the Bible, which means that Abraham doesn't have like a clear picture of who God is. And so as you journey along in the story of Abraham, you got to kind of erase your mind of all the other stuff that you've heard about God in the rest of the Bible or throughout the rest of your life. Just imagine Abraham is encountering a God that he doesn't really know, and he's learning along the way what this God is like. And so this God comes to him and says, I'm going to make you into a great nation. I'm going to bless you greatly so that that nation can bless the world greatly. Abraham's like, cool, I'm going to need some descendants. I'm going to need a son. And so God miraculously gives him a son, even in his old age. And his son's name is Isaac. And one day, when Isaac had grown up, we think that maybe he was like a young man at this point, God comes to Abraham and says, take your son, whom you love, and bring him up on Mount Moriah and sacrifice him. To which our modern ears are like, what? And Abraham the next day gets two servants and his son Isaac, and they get the wood and they got the fire, and they go on a journey up Mount Moriah that takes 3 days. Imagine 3 days of questions, of doubts, of fear. 3 days of these 4 people journeying together, all in conversation about, hey dad, where's the sacrifice? I noticed we don't have any lambs or goats around. Don't worry, son, God's gonna provide the sacrifice somehow. 3 days of doubts. They get to the place on the mountain. Abraham tells the servants to stay while he and Isaac go. And Isaac carries the wood. And they build the altar, and Isaac is upon it. And Abraham raises the knife to kill his son whom he loves. And God sends an angel to say, stop. Now I know that you fear me. Now I know that you trust me. Some people would read this story and think, what a barbaric thing to do. What kind of God does this? Apparently a God with a flair for the dramatic. Apparently a God who likes to bring people on journeys. And along these journeys, there are twists of doubt and fear and irrationality so that he can reveal something to us along those journeys. What gets revealed to Abraham in this journey is that he lived in a culture where child sacrifice was expected. Of course the gods want our kids. Of course they want the thing that means the most to us, our legacy. That's a normal thing for gods to ask. And so this God that Abraham's just getting to know gets him to this place to dramatically reveal to him, I'm not like those gods. I'm so different than those gods, and I don't require this kind of sacrifice. In fact, I will provide the sacrifice. And it's an early image of what God will ultimately do when he gives his own son, Jesus, to rescue us from our sins. Perhaps in this journey to know God, you will need to surrender your epistemology and get ready for a journey up a mountain that will include lots of questions and lots of uncertainty. But perhaps the change in your epistemology will move from, I'll know God through certainty and facts, and instead I'll actually come to know God through obedience. That the way that we come to know God is through obedience. Second idea, perhaps along this journey, you'll begin to ask a new question. I heard someone once famously say that the question that we all have burning inside our souls is not so much, does God exist? But is he good? That's the journey that Abraham goes on. I know God exists, he's talking to me, but is he good? And the revelation that he gets is, he is so good. Perhaps along the journey, you'll be able to let go of that question, does he even exist, for a little while, and begin to ask, is he good? The third idea is to follow and find that the way of Jesus is good and beautiful. Christianity is a way of living. To experience it and to find the God of Christianity, you need to begin to follow the way of Jesus, and along that way, you will discover that it is good and beautiful. There's a famous quote by G.K. Chesterton. He says, Christianity has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and so left untried. Christianity hasn't been tried. Like, people are like, I'm going to give everything I can to follow Jesus. And then when they do that, they find, this sucks. It hasn't been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and so left untried. If I could give you a guarantee this morning, it is not that following Jesus will lead you to this amazing experience, but that following Jesus will lead you to beauty. It will lead you to a beautiful life. The fourth thing that I would ask you to do if you're looking for God is to seek Jesus. And what I mean by that is to not just say, I'm non-resistant to God, to any God. I'm just open to God. But as a Christian and a follower of Jesus myself, I would say, don't open yourself up to whatever's out there, but to ask Jesus by the power of what we call his Holy Spirit to speak to us, to reveal himself to us. Seek Jesus. Learn about who he is. Learn about what he did. Learn about what his character is like. And ask him to reveal himself to you. And so I thought that to end our time this morning, that is what we would do. Is that we would have a moment of non-resistance. And so if you are a person who would say, I am like a non-resistant non-believer, well, then I invite you to have a moment of non-resistance with me. And of course, the rest of you who know Jesus can join in. But by non-resistance, let's begin by a non-resistant posture. So if you take your hands and just open them up and put them on your lap, step one of non-resistance. Step two of non-resistance, I'd invite you to close your eyes. Close your eyes. Now you're in a posture that says to God that you are not resisting his presence. Take a deep breath in. Jesus, by your Spirit, come and touch us. Come and warm our hearts. I want you to hear God speak these words from Psalm 139 to you. I know you. I know you. I see you. I saw you when you got up this morning. I saw you in your pain this week. I am with you. Every moment I am chasing after you. And I love you. I created you. I knit you together in your mother's womb. I know you, and I love you. Jesus, some of us are so hungry. We are thirsty for your presence. Grace us with your touch, please. Help us to surrender. Help us to see. We want to know you. Jesus, continue to call many into your family. And help us to be your ambassadors, your messengers to the world. We love you because you loved us first. And in your resurrected name we pray. Amen.